Did you ever get back to fire?
Yes, I stayed in fire pretty much my whole career during the summertime as part of the volunteer brigade, and well, when I just started out as a JF and whatnot, I went up through the ranks to sector boss under the old fire boss system, and then I transitioned transitioned into the air to take advantage of my pilot training and understanding of aircraft and what they could do and couldn't do, and started through the ranks of air attack boss. And pretty much did that all the way through to about 2 or 3 years after my retirement.
So you did it after you got out of the Forest Service? You still were on incident command teams?
Yes.
Were you on a type 1 or 2, any that kind of a deal, or what was it?
No, I wasn't permanently attached to a single team. It was just there were several teams that whenever they got called out, it was just automatic. They called me and away we went. And as far as during that time period, when I was still a sector boss, went down with Bob Michaels' R1 team to Payson, Arizona, and we were on the Dude Fire on the Tonto, and on the sector right next to mine. In fact, they were probably closer to my sector than their own sector. Was where I believe it was 13 members to an inmate crew got burned over and killed. And so I had to help participate in getting them out.
Did you have any dealings with any other fires or other fatalities?
Unfortunately, yes. There were probably four or five air tanker crews that I worked with quite a bit, that through the course of that 20 or 30 years that I was an air tac, they smoked into the ground and were lost. And when I was in Colorado, I did the initial size up on South Canyon, and as far as what I thought it was going to do and how it was going to respond, and it did exactly what I told them I thought it was going to do 3 days later. And at the time they brought in a California overhead team that had their own air attack, so he was flying air attack on South Cone, and I was about 15, 20 miles south of there on another fire with Barry Hicks' group. And then when it blew, the air attack that was on South Canyon kind of pretty much came unglued, and they pulled him off the fire and sent him back to Grand Junction and pulled me off of the fire I was on to go up to South Canyon and get things back under control and get the tankers back working again and help us with water recovery and whatnot.
Now, what was that the Storm King fire?
Yes. It goes by either Storm King or South King, depending on who you're talking to, either name. And so I went up there and I flew that fire, and for the Cliff was, oh, I don't know, what was Cliff's name? Was the lead plane pilot. And only had one leg. The other one was cut off at his knee, but excellent lead plane pilot. And so he and I directed all the air tanker work to make sure that the recovery crews were safe and whatnot, and getting the helicopters in and out with the fatalities and so forth. And I was up there for probably about 2 or 3 days till things settled down again. So I guess I've been a little too close to too many fatalities.
Did you run into a lot of smoke jumpers over the years? I mean, people that you knew who had been smoke jumpers in the...
I wouldn't say a lot, but we're continually running into one here and one there and whatnot, as I did my firework on other fires.
Yeah. Well, did you have anything else you want to add about your life in the Forest Service, your professional career? Some thoughts you have about it?
Well, it's I guess there's 2 routes you can take, and one route is you can go someplace and work to get immediately assigned to a place you want to stay the rest of your life, and then just hunker down and stay there. You probably won't get as many promotions through your career by that approach, but you'll be where you want to be when you retire. And because you didn't have to sell or buy 4 or 5 houses along the way on your route to retirement, you may have more money than you thought you'd have, because everything's going to be paid for when you retire. Or you can go to climb the ladder and spend a year or 2 years or whatever at each place and keep putting in for jobs. And the only trouble with the climbing the ladder, you'd better want to be climbing the ladder, because what a lot of people started out in the Forest Service for doing was to work out in the woods and to be out. And through the 7, 9 level, you get to do a lot of that. But as you go up the ladder and you get to the 11, 12 level, then you get to see more and more and more of the desk, like most jobs. So you better take a good hard look at what you want to do for the rest of your life and how you want to do it. And I kind of took an in-between approach, in that I kind of had an unwritten rule: if I took a promotion from somebody, then I owed them at least 3 years before I moved on. Because it usually takes 1 year to really understand what's going on, as far as what's going on right and wrong with the areas under your control, and then to design a package to cure those problems and get things on the straight and narrow, and then a year to implement them and get them straighten out before you leave. And so I kind of took the middle of the road approach between the two extremes, and but I still ended up running into, toward the end of my career, much more desk time than I wanted. So that's what I liked about buying some land that's got some forest, some trees on it and whatnot here and in the Swan, so that I can go out and get back to managing the forest. And with my little forest, I can do a lot of things without having to ask Mother, may I, before you do everything, relative to having to comply with NEPA regulations and all that other good stuff, or somebody coming along and having to deal with lawsuits before you got to do anything. And plus my brother also cautioned me about going up too fast, too far, because that's what happened to him. He was started off in Region 3, and then he was selected as forest supervisor in Region 5, or I guess it was Region 6 in Oregon, and was the youngest forest supervisor they'd ever had. And then he got tabbed for being the associate deputy chief of aviation, fire, and fuels in the Washington office. And try his darndest, he couldn't get away from there. He got a short stint away from it as the fire and fuels aviation officer in Ogden for Region 5, and then George Leonard asked him to come back to Washington, D.C. again and try to straighten out the air tanker crisis we were getting ourselves into. And so he used to counsel me quite a bit as far as it's not necessarily a real fun thing to get up in the top of the organization and stay away from Washington and have fun out in the hinterlands. So,
well, have any of your kids gone